on World News Tonight. Growing alarm. UN chief calls for demilitarization at Zaporizhia after fears grow of another incoming attack. A court battle. Judge orders the Justice Department to redact the affidavit justifying the search of Donald Trump's home. Deadly storm. Death toll mounts as unexpected violent thunderstorms batter France's Corsica. And it's Yappy Hour. A dog-friendly happy hour at Wonderbar welcomes dogs to frolic and jump in pools.
This is Derana World News Tonight. Reporting from Colombo, here is Suzanne Shanali.
A very good evening and thank you for joining us on World News Tonight. And we begin with troubling reports from Ukraine about the Russian-held nuclear power plant. Ukraine and Russia are warning of provocation at the Zaporizhia plant as the Secretary General of the United Nations expressed his grave concerns about the situation there.
As Europe's largest nuclear power plant becomes the center of escalating tensions between Russia and Ukraine, prompting fears of catastrophe, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Thursday called for its urgent demilitarization.
And we must tell it as it is. Any potential damage to Zaporizhia is suicide.
It comes as Guterres met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan for talks in Lviv. The situation at the Zaporizhia plant was top of the agenda. Both sides also say the other is planning a provocation at the facility on Friday. It was captured by Russian forces soon after the invasion of Ukraine, and the two countries have accused each other of shelling the plant. Russia has said it could shut down the facility, a move Kyiv warns would increase the risk of a nuclear catastrophe. Shutting down a nuclear power plant is a complicated operation that requires halting nuclear chain reactions while protecting fuel from heating up and causing a meltdown. Zelensky has accused Russia of nuclear blackmail.
On nuclear security, this is most definitely the priority of the whole world. New challenges. Russia should immediately, without any preconditions, withdraw its troops from the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant.
Moscow has rejected the idea of demilitarizing the plant. The war has killed thousands and forced millions to flee after Moscow launched what it calls a special military operation in February.
Americans are getting closer to getting a peek inside the government's rationale for its search for Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. A Florida judge saying that some of the information can be publicly released and giving the government lawyers a week's deadline to figure out what they believe must be redactive.
Tonight, a surprise decision in the battle over whether to release the affidavit behind the search warrant of Mar-a-Lago. A Florida judge telling the government to prepare a redacted version of the affidavit it used to justify the search, saying there are portions that can be unsealed, giving the government a week to make redactions to the document. Attorneys for media companies argue the affidavit should be unsealed, saying not since the Nixon administration had the federal government wielded its power to seize records from a former president in such a public fashion.
It is not the government's job to tell the public what is meaningful in terms of the release of its own information.
But the DOJ forcefully disagreed, saying the investigation is still in its early stages, adding the government is very concerned about the safety of the witnesses in the case whose identities could be compromised if the affidavit is unsealed. Mr. Trump's lawyers did not make any arguments for or against unsealing the affidavit, but the former president has publicly called for the documents to be unsealed. And today, a Trump spokesperson tweeted, "No redaction should be necessary, and the whole affidavit should be released." As for the documents that were taken from Mar-a-Lago, two law enforcement officials tell more than a week after the search, agents are still sifting through the large haul of 27 boxes containing 11 sets of classified information. For his part today, Mr. Trump released a link to a memo he sent in 2021 where he purportedly declassified some material. But legal experts say that's irrelevant to the potential crimes prosecutors are investigating. Adding urgency, a source familiar with the matter tells Inside Trump World there are discussions about whether to release surveillance video of the search. Eric Trump was asked earlier this week if the footage would be released.
Absolutely, Sean, at the right time.
Meanwhile, in New York today, Alan Weisselberg, the former chief financial officer of the Trump Organization, pleaded guilty to tax fraud charges, admitting he took $1.7 million in untaxed perks, including free rent, school tuition, and multiple Mercedes automobiles. Weisselberg agreed to pay nearly $2 million in taxes and fines and serve 5 months in jail. As a part of the plea deal, Weisselberg is expected to provide information about those business dealings, but not about his former boss.
The United States says it will boost its supply of monkeypox vaccine by making available an extra 1.8 million doses of the Bavarian Nordic's shot, as the number of reported cases in the country has risen above 13,500.
Here in the United States, there have been over 13,500 cases of monkeypox identified across 49 states, as well as Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico.
CDC Director Rochelle Walensky on Thursday announced a big jump in the number of monkeypox cases nationwide, which represents more than a third of global cases. The new tally comes as the U.S. scrambles to contain the virus.
The median age of cases is 35, and among cases with known recent sexual history and gender, 93% of cases were among men who reported recent sexual contact with other men.
To respond to the growing outbreak, the Department of Health and Human Services announced Thursday it is boosting its vaccine supply by making the equivalent of an additional 1.8 million doses available in the coming days.
From what we know right now, we expect protection to be the highest 2 weeks after the second dose of the vaccine.
The CDC on Wednesday said an external report into its COVID-19 and monkeypox response found that public guidance had caused confusion.
You no longer need to isolate. However,
while important information was sometimes released too late to inform federal decisions. According to a background briefing document, plans to modernize the agency include giving the CDC new authority to require states to report data, and changes that will allow the CDC to hire more staff more quickly and offer more competitive salaries. Both actions will require authorization from Congress.
Still in the U.S., historic drought that has ravaged much of the West are now parching the Northeast. In fact, the government agency has monitored climate says the drought is affecting 174 million Americans.
These are not images from the desert Southwest. They're from Massachusetts. The new weekly drought monitor out today shows that more of the Northeast is now under extreme drought conditions. Nearly all of New Jersey, Connecticut, and New Hampshire are also in varying levels of drought. Dairy farms in Vermont are struggling to feed their livestock. New York's Rockland County is declaring a Stage 2 water emergency, instituting mandatory restrictions. Starting today, you could only water lawns on certain days here. And restaurants can't serve water unless customers specifically ask. It's the next phase of a punishing drought that has already ravaged the southwestern U.S.
This, I think, is the worst year we've ever had.
In Texas, 2 reservoirs of the Rio Grande are drying up.
Drought's going to be a huge issue in the U.S. in the coming decades because it's going to affect water supplies and it's going to affect growing food. And both of those are critical to our economy. And it's going to mean that we can't keep living the way we do.
Experts say climate change is reaching unprecedented levels worldwide. A record-breaking heat wave in China is shutting down semiconductor factories, including those that make microchips exported to the U.S.
The consequences of climate change are still ravaging much of Europe as fierce thunderstorms and hurricane forces winds hit the French island of Corsica, killing at least 5 people, including a teenage girl, and injuring dozens of others.
Gusts of wind wreaked havoc at the airport in Ajaccio, Corsica on Thursday. 1 plane was damaged and most flights have been delayed. Elsewhere on the island, the situation was no better. As seen in this video shot at someone's home, winds reached up to 224 kilometers per hour on the island, known for its good weather during the summer. Several people were killed and others wounded. At the Segan campsite, a 13-year-old girl was killed after a tree struck her bungalow. These tourists are still reeling from the shock.
Tree branches were falling everywhere. It was pretty scary. We went to take shelter in the bathroom. We were seeing people running everywhere. It was very tough.
A few kilometers away on the Liamone beach in Koja, a 72-year-old woman died as the top of a straw hut struck her car. In Calvi, a man in his 40s was also killed, also after a tree collapsed on his bungalow. 45,000 homes across the island have had their power cut. The island's south was the hardest hit. In the streets of Ajaccio, destroyed cars, collapsed trees, and in the water, some boats sank.
There was a tsunami this morning. It was crazy. We've never seen anything like it. Never. Buoys were flying up in the air, trees were falling, and the straw hut over there fell.
2 people died at sea, and rescue teams are deployed to assist several other boats.
Let's go into a short commercial break. We'll be back soon with more world news. Welcome back to World News Tonight. Now, railway staff in Britain staged the latest in the series of strikes, once again disrupting commuters and leisure travelers as decades-high inflation hits salaries and prompts walkouts across various industries.
They've had to miss appointments and arrive late to weddings, but at stations from London to Leeds, few travellers are complaining.
We're all just trying to make a living and get by, aren't we? So I've got all the sympathy in the world for them.
I'm very much in favour of them. They need higher wages.
I blame the rail companies. I don't blame the workers at all. I think we've all got to fight for, better standard of living.
The latest action from British railway workers comes days after news that inflation in the UK hit 10% in July for the first time since the 1980s. Outside London's Euston Station, former Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn joined the picket line alongside strike figurehead Mick Lynch. The union leader says people across sectors are fed up with decades of low pay and that the strike has woken up a spirit of solidarity.
We're seeing a great deal of support. People are coming back to the ideas of collective action, of strike action and solidarity amongst working people. So I think we've got our profile up. We've got this issue at the centre of national debate. And now our job is to get an agreement with the company so that our members can get back to work on a regular basis.
The chief of Network Rail described negotiations as slow and painful, with the lack of clarity over what it would take for the strike to be called off. Workers in other sectors are also taking action this month, from the Postal Service to dockers to garbage collectors.
South Korea president's initiative to bring North Korea back to talks is gradually taking shape. 2 key cabinet members explained to lawmakers how the plan can be implemented.
Unification Minister Kwon Young-se told lawmakers Thursday that moving forward, South Korea is going to be more specific in its messages to North Korea about its so-called audacious initiative and work to create conditions for the regime to embrace the plan. The Yoon Suk-yeol administration seeks to dramatically improve the North's economy and infrastructure if Pyongyang takes real steps toward denuclearization. This would include a large-scale food program, assistance with its power grid, the modernization of its ports, airports, and medical system, as well as agricultural and financial support. Speaking at a parliamentary session, Minister Kwon explained that the plan will also include political and military measures corresponding to the level of progress made towards denuclearization. He added that the government will push for the establishment of an inter-Korean Joint Economic Development Committee to coordinate with North Korea on how the various projects will be carried out. Details have yet to be revealed, but the minister said South Korea will iron them out in close cooperation with the United States and other ministries, while striving to garner support from related countries, such as China. Also addressing lawmakers in the same session was Foreign Minister Park Jin, who said South Korea will work closely with the U.S. and the international community to try and bring North Korea back to the negotiating table and implement Yoon's audacious initiative. To do so, he emphasized the 3 pillars of deterrence, dissuasion, and diplomacy. But should the regime conduct another major provocation, such as a 7th nuclear test, he reaffirmed that South Korea will seek not just new UN Security Council sanctions, but also its own sanctions against Pyongyang. The 2 ministers both said the North appears to have finished preparations for what would be its first nuke test since 2017. Kwon said Pyongyang appears to be taking several political factors into consideration on deciding when to press the button.
A blast that tore through a Kabul mosque during the evening prayers killed 21 people, Kabul police said, as the United Nations expressed concern over a growing number of civilian casualties from explosions.
A day of mourning in Kabul, as locals bury the coffins of those who perished in the bomb blast which ripped through the Siddiqiyah mosque. Several people were killed, with many more wounded, in the latest attack to hit Afghanistan since the Taliban seized power. Relatives could be seen queuing anxiously outside Kabul's emergency hospital, waiting for news of their family members who were being treated inside for injuries.
30% of the admitted patients are in severe condition, in serious condition, and they've underwent major surgery. It's a reminder that still this hospital is very much needed, that the war, as much as it's publicized that it's finished, that there is peace in Afghanistan, still there is something going on.
Members of the ruling Taliban meanwhile guarded the site on Thursday, preventing journalists from gaining access to the mosque. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the explosion. However, it comes just 1 week after the Islamic State group said it was behind a suicide bomb attack which killed a top Taliban cleric. While the Taliban maintain they've defeated the militants, experts say the jihadist group still pose the greatest threat to security in Afghanistan, and minority groups in particular.
The man accused of stabbing Salman Rushdie at a literary event pleaded not guilty to attempted murder and assault charges at a court hearing in the upstate New York.
Dressed in a black and white uniform, 24-year-old Hadi Matar stayed quiet as he appeared in court on Thursday, again pleading not guilty. Speaking outside the court, District Attorney Jason Schmidt gave an update about where the case stands.
So the way the hate crime statute works in New York State is it serves as an enhancement device so that, let's say a B-level felony can now go up a step. So we're looking at that. We chose not to indict it for reasons that, it's important to us to go with where the facts meet the law, and that's our, decision for now.
Rushdie was attacked while on stage at a literary event in New York State last Friday, sustaining severe injuries. Matar was arrested at the scene. On Wednesday, he told the New York Post that he did not like Rushdie, who he said had attacked Islam, all the while admitting that he'd only read 2 pages of Rushdie's controversial novel, The Satanic Verses. He also expressed surprise that Rushdie had survived the attack. Commenting on the interview, District Attorney Schmidt said it could be used in the case. Hadi Matar's lawyer, meanwhile, asked the judge to do something to stop reporters from trying to contact his client. Outside the courtroom, he rebuked a crowd of journalists. Matar was born and raised in the U.S., but has family roots in southern Lebanon. He is next scheduled to appear in court in September.
Welcome back to World News Tonight, and for more news, let's take you around the world in a minute. Eurozone inflation reached a new record high of 8.9% year-on-high in July. The EU Statistics Office confirmed, with the core measures excluding the most volatile components and key of monetary policy also sharply up. 2 children drowned while a search for 5 other people were underway after a car was swept away by a flash flood in Maldives River in Pakistan's port of Karachi. Cleveland Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson will be suspended 11 games without pay and fined $5 million for violating the NFL's personnel conduct policy, the league said, a harsher punishment than the 6-game ban previously recommended. Torrential rain hit parts of New Zealand for the 4th day, forcing hundreds of people from their homes, and rivers overflowed their banks and waterlogged grounds becomes unstable. Dubai's Emirates says that it will suspend flights to Nigeria from September because it has been unable to repatriate tens of millions of dollars of revenue. And that's all the news we got for you tonight. Join us again on Monday for more news around the globe. In case you missed watching any of the stories we aired tonight, you can always rewatch by catching us on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Derana English. And finally, we are leaving you tonight with dogs frolicking and jumping into pools as Wonder Bar offers a dog-friendly happy hour known as the Yappy Hour. Stay safe and have a good night.